I definitely think we are predisposed in this industry to have underlying mental health issues. Anxiety and depression is incredibly prevalent in our industry. It maybe goes down to personality type. I think if you're attracted to the industry, you're a people person, you're an empathetic person, and you're an adrenaline junkie, and I think that can be a cocktail for disaster.
I'm Dani Valent, and this is Dirty Linen, the podcast that takes the issues the hospitality industry finds hard to air in public and shakes them all about. Bianca Welsh owns 3 businesses in Launceston, Tasmania. I first heard her speak on my sister podcast, or should I say brother podcast, Deep in the Weeds, when Huck spoke to her a month or 2 ago. I thought she was a perfect person to kick off our next topic, which is mental health in the hospitality industry. Bianca is a business owner and manages her staff, but something that happened in her business a few years ago made her want to learn more about how people tick, and she's taken that knowledge forward into the way that she looks after the people in her business. Thanks so much for having a chat to us today, Bianca.
Thank you very much for having me.
So tell us what it was that made you want to learn more about how people work and how they can be assisted.
So I was a new business owner. I was probably 2 into my second year of being an owner-manager, and I had an amazing waitress who was just, she was just one of those guns, casual, but just came in and gave, 110%. And she started, her behaviour started to change. She was quite vague, was making a lot of mistakes. It was just very odd, and it became apparent to the other team members around her that she was binging and purging. So an eating disorder was rearing its head at work, and it was happening on shift, and it just became, I didn't want to just brush it under the rug or pretend that it wasn't my fault, wasn't my problem, or that I'd just, cut her hours being casual and maybe, write her out of the roster sort of thing. I wanted to address it and, see if I could help and to retain her because she was such a great asset to the team. And so, yeah, it propelled me into wanting to learn more about the mind, because when I kind of went down the road of wondering what to do about it, I did all this research on Google, and this was like 9 years ago, and I just couldn't really find anything of substance. I was probably not looking in the right place, but I lost sleep over it. I made myself physically ill with the stress of it, and I finally had that conversation with her, and the conversation didn't quite go the way I was hoping it would go. It was very much a denial conversation. And then, 24 hours later, and I was panicking. I was like, oh my goodness, I've made it worse. She's not going to come back. She's just going to leave. And 24 hours later, she said, thank you for, I got this really long text message thanking me for bringing it up with her. She was in complete denial about it. It was an underlying condition she had from when she was younger, and some stressful things in her life had brought it back up, and she was seeking help, and and now she's a doctor herself. And I was really,
wow,
yeah, I was very moved by that. A simple conversation with someone could, it can save a life. Really, it can improve someone's life.
Yeah, that's really amazing. So how long was it between finding out that she was binging and purging and you feeling equipped to have that conversation with her about it?
It took me about 6 weeks to build up the courage to do it, and I was aware of it, and it was upsetting the other team because we've got a staff toilet, but most of the chefs use that, so the girls tend to prefer using the other toilets, and that they're just the public toilets. So we have 3 cubicles in there, and it had just become quite obvious because a couple of the girls had been in the toilet at the same time as her, and it was quite distressing to them. So it was not only impacting that employee, but it was impacting the team around her. And I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I also can imagine, like, while you're there, you'd hardly be able to think about anything else. because you are in that leadership role where you want to look after everybody and including, of course, your customers. It must have been really, really difficult. And I suppose it's one thing to muster up the courage to have a conversation, and it looks like that was, in this case, a really good prompt for that person to, acknowledge what was happening and to seek some help. But I think sometimes, just having a conversation or opening up an issue, it doesn't necessarily lead to helpful action. So what did you then go and do after having this experience?
So I sat on it for a bit. It probably took me a few months to kind of conjure up the idea, and I just had this moment of going, I want to go and study this. I want to learn more. I want to be the best manager I can be. I want to be able to identify and potentially help people, help our team, because I know that this sort of stuff's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And probably more prevalent in the workplace. I think in the last 5 years, the conversations have become a lot better. Even in the last 12 months, I think the conversations have become a lot better, particularly in the mass media and in a lot of programs and our awareness of mental health. But I just knew it wasn't going to go away. So I enrolled in the local uni at UTAS and did a degree in psychology. So I've got a Bachelor of Behavioural Science, which is now known as psychological science. And that took me 7 years part-time, which was pretty intense. And I won't lie, it was it was really hard amongst, we took on a business during that time. We took on what was a providore above Stillwater restaurant, and which we've now turned into boutique rooms. I had a baby, I got married. I got married and started uni all within the first month of each other, which was pretty intense. And being a mature age student, like I hadn't studied since I'd done my hospitality management certificate, and so it was very daunting. But I always promised myself that if I wasn't enjoying the actual content, it wasn't to get the certificate at the end of it. It was to learn and absorb the content. And if I wasn't learning, I'd promised myself I just wouldn't continue. But every semester, I really enjoyed the content and learning all about, and I've just scratched the surface of what is out there to be known. But I certainly don't, and I really emphasize this, that I don't think that every manager or every business owner needs to go out and get a psych degree, but it's just some basic understanding and awareness can really, really help a workplace culture, help your team, help retain people, help attract people. I've got so many people that come into interviews and say, why did you want to apply? Why do you want to work with us? And I was like, I've heard, you're really great with, mental health, and that's, I think that's quite admirable in a workplace, and that means a lot to me, particularly, and that's why we're having this conversation. Hospitality is just not really known for good mental health practices, and our cohort tends to be the more vulnerable. We're socially isolated due to the times that we work, and we work weekends, we work nights, the shift work, working nights has an impact on our sleep, all that sort of stuff. The substance abuse, we're exposed to alcohol, 24/7. It's a part of our job. We live and breathe it, but it can become toxic. And, we're in a pressure cooker of an environment. We're in stressful situations. And if we don't support and understand the way the mind works, and that mental wellness is actually a minority and that mental illness is actually the majority, we're never going to move forward in a positive way in the industry.
Do you think that, you've mentioned some of those sort of pressure cooker or circumstantial reasons that mean that hospitality and mental challenges go together, but do you think there's also something about, do you think it's about the kind of people that are drawn to the industry as well? Do you think that people come to hospitality more than other industries with underlying challenges in their lives?
Yes, I do. I think there's a number of answers to that. I definitely think we are predisposed in this industry to have underlying mental health issues. Anxiety and depression is incredibly prevalent in our industry. And I think it maybe goes down to personality type. I think if you're attracted to the industry, you're a people person, you're an empathetic person, and you're an adrenaline junkie, and I think that is quite a cocktail for, it can be a cocktail for disaster. I think that the education system pushes people that are particularly vulnerable into the industry and kind of paint the picture that that's all that they're capable of doing, and it perhaps isn't the right industry for them to be doing. The conventional classrooms, I think, just push those that are perhaps a little bit problematic or, don't learn in a conventional way. They just push them into that, you just go into a vet course when you're in year 11 or 12 or something, or that you'll just go off to TAFE after school. I think that has an impact as well. And because the hours, the flexible hours, I think probably do attract a person that, doesn't want to adhere to the normal society. I think we're all probably a little bit left of centre in the hospital industry. But on the same token, that's what I love. I love the people that work in hospitality. You meet the best characters. I've loved listening to your podcast, to Huck's podcast. There's so many great personalities out there, and they're just the tip of the industry. There's just, people are the best part of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to smooth it all out and just have a bunch of safe characters in the industry, but I guess it's about how do you nurture those people and let them use, their abilities in a way that is healthy as well as productive, and as well as pushing the industry forward. So Bianca, what are some of the things that you learnt in your course about people and about how they tick that has helped you be a manager?
I refer to it quite often. I think the biopsychosocial model is what had the biggest impact on me understanding a person and the way their mind might work. So that essentially is the biological, psychological, and social model of the makings of a person and the way the mind works. So obviously biological can be, a very complex, the brain is the most complex of our organs. If you think about the way that, experts and medical professionals research the brain, we're pretty blind, really, because you can't just open it up and have a look at a working brain. I mean, there's ways, but, the technology has come so far, in the last 10 years, and, over the last 50 years. So we've got so much potential to understand the brain more. We're at the mercy of those technologies like, MRIs and scans and all that sort of stuff. And then we're at the mercy of, self-reporting. The science behind the studies of psychology are really complicated, and it's all about the design of the study, which, can be, it can be good, it can be great, it can be average, it can be terrible. So there's so much in the biological side. It could be predisposition, genetics, all that sort of stuff. Then you've got the psychological, so that makes up, the way that you view the world. So your perception, your personality, your experiences, how they've shaped you. Again, underlying or predisposed to being a particularly anxious person, or, all that sort of stuff. And then you've got the social. So you've got, where you live, or your friend circle, or, perhaps particular traumas you've been through, or there's so many ingredients into making a person who they are, that for it to go right and for you to be mentally well is incredible. Like, that's the anomaly. And I think that that's when we flip it around rather than talking about mental illness being the minority. It's really not. Self-reporting can, I get very skeptical of studies and all the stats that you see. You refer to being a psych student or a research methods student, because you certainly question, when they, on the news and they say, oh, this study found X, Y, Z, you sort of go, well, how many people were in that study? What were the controls? Who, there's lots of questions as to, I think we rely a lot on those blanket statements.
Yeah, well, I think it's so fluid and ever changing as well. I mean, any one of those biopsychosocial elements. I mean, there's so many different strands to each of them, and they can fluctuate so much. I mean, you might have had a bad night's sleep. Someone might speak to you in a hurtful way. Like you might trip over and fall down and feel a bit silly, and then the next thing that happens is impacted by that. So I think. You might be happy in the morning and sad in the evening, and you're still the same person.
Yes, that's right. And yet there was so much that I loved learning about, obviously, all the different mental illnesses and, childhood development and, neuroscience and all these sort of, research methods. It was, it opened up my mind quite a lot into a lot of different facets of how people tick. But I guess my philosophy, though, always was, as a manager, that we can't expect people to leave their troubles at the door anymore. When I first started when I had my first job, it was that mindset that you leave your troubles at the door. You come and you do your job, and then you go home and you pick up your troubles back at the door, and you deal with that outside of work. And that's not the case anymore. We can't expect people to do that. When you've got a mental illness, when you're particularly anxious or depressed, or you've been through particular trauma and you've got a trigger and it happens at work, or there's so many elements of a person's day where something might rear its head. We cannot expect people to not speak up and say, I'm not okay, or I need help, or that, I can leave my depression at the door, or I can leave my anxiety at the door, or I can leave my substance abuse at the door, or I can leave that massive fight I had with my partner just before I came to work at the door. When we're in when we're in a service industry, we have to put on our best show. Like when we walk in the door, we're on show. We've got to step up to the performance. But as owners, managers, supervisors, restaurateurs, we should be able to have some tools at the ready to be able to have those tricky conversations, or to identify when someone's not doing okay, and to be able to then support them through that, rather than say, you don't come to work, don't be here. Because often I find that a lot of the time coming to work can almost be their therapy. They can almost kind of work through their problems or their illness with the people that they trust, and has become family. We often say, everyone in industry says, your work friends, your work colleagues are your family, and that can be really powerful and can give a lot of tools back to people, to have the resilience to maybe fight through what they're going through.
So give us some tools. Like, let's get into some really practical stuff. What are some tools that you've learned that perhaps other people could apply in their own situations?
It's in identifying behaviour. So from a manager's perspective, I'm very lucky where I do work alongside the team. I'm not, I don't sit behind a desk. I don't do the finances. Like, my role is in the restaurant, developing the team, in the HR role. So I work on the restaurant floor, I'll sweep the floors, I'll work alongside them. So I've got that, I'm able to have that relationship with people, to ask them how their day is, what's been going on, and then to observe their performance through service or, in setup. And it's often in those idle times that you can sort of pick up on maybe something's not right, or certain conversations. You can overhear a conversation with maybe another one of their colleagues that doesn't sound, that something's amiss. It can be as simple as you overhear them saying, I'm not sleeping well, or this has happened with my boyfriend, or, oh, I'm just feeling a bit off, or they're calling in sick kind of maybe a bit often, or something. You've just got to be able to gauge when something's not right in someone's life, and then to be able to pull them aside at an appropriate time and to have that conversation with them, and you just sit them. I found it a useful tool to just sit down, have a coffee, and say, this is my observations of kind of your performance, but also, I overheard you say that maybe you're not sleeping well. Is everything okay? And you've got to push a bit. It depends on the person, but you've got to push a bit. And then it can often just be the simple, "Are you okay?" And that it opens up the flood walls. But, you've got to step back and have that culture there to begin with. You've got to have that relationship with your team, that they trust you. And if it's perhaps not you, perhaps get a manager or another colleague that maybe has that relationship with a person you're concerned about, to maybe have a conversation with them. And then from there, you can start to unpack what's going on and what you can perhaps do to help. So we have an employee assistance program, an EAP, and that is a free counselling service to the team, where we pick up the bill for 3 free counselling sessions. It's a third-party provider. We don't get names. We just get the department that they work in. So it'll just say a report saying a front of house person accessed the program.
Okay. So they can do it without you referring them each time?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
And so if they're not comfortable to have maybe that conversation with me, I will, say, look, there is this service. You're more than welcome to access it. We do it. It's in our formal induction packs. It's in our employee handbooks. All the managers are aware that we have this service, so that they can recommend that if they're not wanting to speak with someone within the business, to speak to someone else. And it's completely confidential, so we don't get any other details back from the counselling service about what they've spoken about or anything. And it doesn't need to be about work, and that's what I emphasise as well, is that I want to talk to you about what's going on in your life, because obviously what is going on in your personal life is having an impact on you at work. And I've got a business to run, but also I want to help you. And so the communication lines need to kind of meet in the middle. So we also have that program, which you'd find a lot of corporate businesses have that. So for a hospitality business to have it, I think it's a really great service. And I actually just got the report this morning, and no one accessed it in the last financial year from our team. And I can hope that that's because they were comfortable to come and speak with us. But also, I think it's just a really great thing to have, to show your team that you're serious about their mental well-being. And it's not just what's happening within these 4 walls, it's what's happening in their personal life.
And so what kind of scenarios have people been going through while they've been employed by you that you've been able to help them through?
So we've supported and, worked through people that have obviously depression and anxiety, obviously the most prevalent, but substance abuse, sadly quite a few impacted greatly by suicide, like spouse dying by suicide, which is,
wow.
It's hard to talk about. We've had unwanted pregnancies, sexual assault, bipolar, suicidal suicidal thoughts themselves, divorces, relationship breakups, terminal illnesses within their families, cancer diagnoses, everything like this, trauma, and, trauma from, like their dog being run over in front of them to, some really crazy things that happen to people. And it could happen to them before they even start working for you. But it's, stuff can rear its head, and that's the tricky thing with psychology, is that you just don't know when something's going to pop up. And I find, particularly because our industry, we tend to get young adults, we tend to get people where these things start to become a lot more prevalent in an adult's life. The statistics show that. And so you often need to navigate young adults going through quite a lot of changes in their world, in the way that they're coming to terms with who they are, their maturity, their different, life changes. And, where in psychology you talk about stress. There's like a stress index, and the top stress index. I can't remember the point system. Like say 50 out of 100, or 75 out of 100, and you're like 100 out of 100's your significant person in your life dying, or divorce, or even moving house is like 50 points. A relationship breakup, all those sorts of things. A new job is really high on a stress index. So you're navigating all these.
Where does a pandemic fit in?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I should look that up.
Off the chart, maybe.
From my experience, yeah, maybe 110. That you're going through a lot of things with your people, and you've got to be there to help them through it and to guide them through it. So another thing that is really important for people having the conversation, so the managers and the owners just need to have an understanding of perhaps what's available in their immediate community. So we've got a really great Headspace centre in Launceston. You need to understand a little bit about what's the difference between a counsellor and a psychologist. We offer the counselling service, but, I'm always going to beat the drum of a psychologist, having done a psychology degree. And, I aspire one day to maybe become a clinical psychologist. That would be perhaps the thing that I go and do after restaurants, if that ever happens. I'll probably die in restaurants though. But, the difference of what they offer, because what we also learn in psychology is that the relationship between your professional provider and the client can attribute to just as much as medical treatment. So it can have as big an impact on you as a client as taking an antidepressant or taking an anti-anxiety medication. So to understand that, and this is something I advise anyone, is that if you've gone to seek help and you've got an appointment with a counsellor, you've got an appointment with a psychologist, and something's not, you just haven't connected, it's not right, then that's okay for you to say, look, this isn't for me, I need to find someone else. Don't write off psychology or a psychologist or a counsellor as not working for you as a blanket. I'm done with it. It's probably just the person. And I liken it to a relationship. We fall in love with certain people. We become friends with certain groups of people, or, you connect with certain people for a reason. And so just because you've been referred to a psychologist doesn't mean that you're going to connect with them the way you're meant to in a textbook. So there's so many different treatments and theories of how to treat patients that it might just not be that that's right for you. So you should go back to your GP. So sorry, I'm jumping ahead a step. So for managers to have an understanding of the pathway of what needs to happen for someone to get help, that you can go and see a counsellor without a referral, but you should go to your GP and explicitly say, I want a mental health plan. Can you please refer me to a psychologist? I'm feeling, X, Y, Z. And that hopefully that GP, your GP, will have, a bank of people that they know, one specialises in XYZ that they can maybe refer you to.
And then everyone's entitled to 10 free sessions a year, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And then your GP, if you're wanting to continue that, your GP just writes you another mental health plan, a calendar, on the year. And so the pathways of how to get help are really important, because a lot of people don't know how to do that and how to be explicit with your GP, not to just go and ask. And that's something that I became very passionate about through my degree and through my personal experience. My husband wouldn't mind me saying that he's had some really big struggles with mental health, and we're very proud to say that he's overcome a lot in his time, and that's been working on it together. I hear so often that someone's gone to their GP and said, I'm feeling anxious. They just write a prescription for them and off they go. They don't even refer them to a psychologist. They say, yeah, maybe you should see someone, but why don't we give this a go? Like, I just don't get it, because, a psychologist can have as big an impact as medication. I'm certainly not against medication. I've seen, James has had to go through a ridiculous amount of different medications through his journey. And I've seen the impacts and I've seen the side effects, and it's horrific, and it's awful, and can impact in so many negative ways, that it's been through the tools that a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a counsellor can give you to put in your toolbox that can get you through, irrational thoughts, as an example, or, it's just establishing a toolbox. And when a doctor just writes a prescription for a medication, it's not enough. It needs to be in conjunction with psychological treatment.
It's a bit of a blunt instrument. So, I mean, as you say, a medication can be an important part of the solution for some people, but it's not necessarily the first place to turn. And it is great to use the resources that are available to all of us through our GPs and our health system to get those free sessions. Bianca, let's wrap up by you talking about some of the things that other managers might not think of that they can have in their toolbox. You've talked about talking and about having that openness and that sense that you don't have to leave your problems at the door. But are there some really practical things you could do in a restaurant that would, I don't know what it is, whether it's reducing the possibility of things triggering people, or whether it's just creating an environment that promotes wellness in a more complete way? Like, what are some of the things that people could look at in their business and wonder if they could make some change?
Yeah, so I guess we're fortunate in we have the flexibility of, we've got a big team. We've got we've got 41 on JobKeeper, and I've hired back maybe like 10 casuals back into the mix of across the three businesses. So we've got a big team and we've got lots of different departments. So I often offer for someone particularly who's struggling with dealing with people, like, because we've obviously, whether at the coalface, maybe that they need less customer interaction. Just they still want to come to work, they're still able to work, but they perhaps need just a reduced load. Say I have them on a smaller section. So obviously the communication lines need to be very open, and that person needs to be very proactive in letting you know these things before shift, before you've done the allocations for your service and you're like, right, this person's in this area, da da da. And that can take a lot of effort from that person. So, and can take some practice from that person, but, work on it, and that it can be really useful. So yeah, I might have them in a section where they're just less exposed to customers, or, they're really good on coffee as well as on the floor. So perhaps they're just better off to just do a coffee shift where they don't need to talk to anyone. They can just make coffee and not speak, and they can still do their job. Do they need to just come in and do like a short cleaning shift or the setup shift, or do they need to have the first knock off so that they can try and get in a better sleep pattern? Are they in physical pain, where maybe they've got some, like a bad knee and they haven't really communicated it because they didn't want to bother people, but You've picked up on it. Okay, let's look at, Tassie's very, Launceston's freezing in winter, and late nights, make it particularly play up. So let's look at where we can move your shifts around. It's being very creative with what you can do within your organisation. It can be sometimes organising a social event can be really positive. Sometimes in the past I've tried to organise, like exercise, like a boot camp kind of thing, or where we get to do together and do like fun sort of training sessions or team building sessions, or that can also have a really great boost on morale and just kind of get some people out of a bit of a funk. Some other practical things. Yeah, it's really trying to direct them to try to seek help, try to talk to someone that they trust, whether it's a family member, or using counselling service, or, talking to their GP. It's scheduling catch-ups off-site, because people, when you're a family, you talk, you see when someone's having a meeting with the boss, and you go, oh, what are they talking about? So maybe doing that off-site to make them feel more comfortable to open up and to, regularly chat. It's trying to be as creative as you can with that particular person and maybe what they need.
It all sounds, really, really good. One more thing. Have you got any strategies for coping with a pandemic?
Oh, well, I was trying to do a little bit of reading when all of this hit, about, when we've all been in ISO, and I'm really feeling for our Melbourne friends. And, the studies kind of pull up. We did a unit on extreme environments. So you research the psychology of people in, Antarctica, or they, astronauts, and, extreme environments where they've obviously got to have a lot of resilience and, a psychological disposition to be sent to those places to work or live or whatever. Astronauts and people in Antarctica, you're advised to stick to a routine as best you can. So, when you're in social isolation, or, you're in lockdown, try to stick to a routine as much as possible. And whether that's just getting out of bed, at the same time each day, and, making your coffee and, reading a blog that, you enjoy, or something, it doesn't need to be go out and go for a run, or, just some sort of routine within your household can really help anxiety and your mental health. I guess just talking as much as you can, reaching out. I found personally listening to podcasts, listening to other people tell their stories has been very, very comforting. I've actually really hated Zoom. Like, I have a lot of meetings on Zoom, and I just don't like that tech. I just find it quite disjointed. I think just phone chats like this is a much more nicer way to have. It's a more flowing conversation. So I think, don't feel like you need to buy into the, wine chats on Zoom with your friends. Like, if that's not for you, don't feel bad that that's not for you. Just
staying connected, and
it's tricky. It's really hard. Yeah.
It's pretty hard just being thrown back into it, I've got to say. It's not where you want to be. But anyway, we'll get through it. Bianca, it's so great to chat to you. You've got such a unique perspective on the industry, given your degree that you did just in the meantime. So thank you so much for kicking off these chats about mental health in hospitality. You've given people a lot of resources just through their GP. That's a really great place to turn to if people are needing some support. But I'd also encourage anybody who needs to check out beyondblue.org.au. There are lots of resources there. Lifeline is always there, and the number for that is 131114. Stay well, everybody. Breathe deep, wash your hands, and thanks so much, Bianca, for being part of Dirty Linen.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.